Hello and shalom, everybody. My name is Julia Jassy, and you are listening to Nice Jewish Girls, brought to you by Unpacked, a division of Open Door Media. Before we start the show, if you're a regular listener, you know the drill. If you're new here, amazing, welcome. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss out on our new episodes, coming out weekly. Let's get right into it. On today's episode, we are sitting down with Michal Cohen, Chief Marketing Officer of Jewish on Campus. Michal has been an integral part of Jewish on Campus since it was founded over a year ago. And I can attest to that since I am the Chief Executive Officer and one of the founders. She has used her powerful history as an Israeli-American woman to fight tirelessly for the Jewish community. And boy, has she faced some intense antisemitism for doing so. But, like Jewish women do, Michal keeps fighting on, now as an executive member of a nonprofit organization that has reached more success than anybody could have imagined, in large part because of its leadership of young, authentic voices. I might be just a little bit biased, but I think that Jewish on Campus is freaking awesome, and so is Michal. In this conversation today, I want to hear about Michal's experience with antisemitism, especially as an Israeli-American college student at a time when universities are not always friendly places for Israelis. I want to hear what she thinks Americans get wrong about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And really, I want to dive into the work that we do together from her perspective. You know that I am so excited for you guys to meet her. Let's do this thing. Michal Cohen is a senior at American University studying public relations and strategic communications with a double minor in Israel studies and political science. Wow, that's a lot to study. She is a first-generation Israeli-American, and outside of school, she works with me as the Chief Marketing Officer of Jewish on Campus. When she isn't working for Jewish on Campus or her 3 other internships, she is at SoulCycle with her dog Toby or reading. Michal, it's so great to have you. You're one of my closest friends in the world, so having you on this podcast just feels awesome today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So let's start from the beginning. Can you tell us about where you're from?
Sure. So I like to say that I'm from everywhere and nowhere. I was born in New York, and then I moved to LA, and then I moved to Miami, and then I moved to Israel, and then I moved back to Miami. And now I go to school in DC, but most of my family is from Brazil, Argentina, Romania.
Oh my goodness.
I'm from everywhere, basically.
And so you grew up in the US?
Yeah.
At what point did you move abroad to Israel?
So I moved to Israel when I was 10. So right before middle school, end of elementary school. We moved back because it was very hard, I think, for me and particularly me to acclimate, in the sense that living in Israel is not easy as much as it's very much glamorized in the US and I just in the diaspora in general, but moving there, especially at such a young age, is really hard. You know, the cultural shift, the way of life, the quality of living is so different from here. And it was really hard. And so we decided that before high school, it would be better for me to move back.
How has that relationship with Judaism shifted as you've lived in the diaspora and in Israel and then back in the diaspora?
Yeah, I would say, so I grew up modern Orthodox. I still am modern Orthodox. My relationship with Judaism has definitely ebbed and flowed in the sense of when I was younger, I didn't really have an opinion, and I don't think a lot of young Jews necessarily, or like Jewish children, have an opinion on Judaism, just because it comes so naturally, and you're spoon-fed it, and like you don't really have thoughts and opinions yet. But as I was going into middle school and end of elementary school, that definitely changed in the sense that I was thinking about it more. I definitely had some resentment towards it. And then definitely when I was going into college, that was kind of this point in my life where no one was watching me, whether to keep Shabbat, to keep kosher, to do the holidays. And so I had to make a conscious decision whether I wanted to be mine, whether, you know, it's not something that my parents, you know, forced me or, you know, someone was like watching me or anything like that. Like, I had the decision whether I wanted to continue living this Jewish life or whether I wanted to, you know, just be another kid. And then through a lot of, you know, thought and really like this back and forth with myself, I decided, yes, like how did I ever think I didn't want to live this life? And so now I keep Shabbat and kosher and all that jazz.
Yeah, absolutely. So the relationship with Judaism in America is really, really specific and distinct. And there are so many things that are so particular to the Jewish American community. Even the name of this podcast, Nice Jewish Girls, or different tropes like the Jewish American princess, they're all so specific to the American Jewish community. I mean, in particular, the New York Jewish community. Just being from New York myself, it's something that I grew up with. Was that something that shifted the relationship to Judaism as a cultural thing when you were in Israel versus when you were in the U.S.?
That's a good question. I never heard of Nice Jewish Girl, Jewish American Princess, Nice Jewish Boy, like all this very American Jewry like lingo before high school when I moved back to the US. And I remember the first time I heard it, I was like, what? Because Judaism in America specifically versus Judaism in Israel is so different. In the US, it's very much either you're in a community or you're out. In Israel, that's not really a thing because it is like
there isn't an out.
Exactly. Not in the sense of here. But you have like atheist Jews living in Israel who like live their lives as cultural Jews. But here in the US, you don't really see that. Like, for example, my dad, he grew up like an atheist Jew.
In the US or in Israel?
In Israel. My grandfather, his father, he's a physicist who worked in the secret but not so secret nuclear facility in Dimona.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so they were like, yeah, we believe in science. What do you mean, you know, God and, you know, 7 days of creation, et cetera, et cetera. And so they were atheists and like they loved Israel. They were Zionists.
Yeah.
But they were still part of, you know, the Jewish community. But here you don't, like in the US, you don't really see that. I mean, now my dad is like religious and everything, but it's just interesting to see the difference.
It's interesting because, I mean, America is, I think we talk about this a lot in the Jewish community more broadly recently, kind of reckoning with the fact that America is culturally Christian, even though a lot of people aren't or might be atheist. And a lot of the time, people who aren't Jewish or Muslim or Hindu or Sikh or other religions don't kind of take that for granted. Because they grew up in a community where it was super normal to have off for Christmas and for Easter, even if that's the only extent to your relationship with your religion. Whereas with Judaism, there are so many cultural pieces of it, and we have to almost minimize our Judaism into just a religion when we're in public spaces, which it's a lot more than that. It's also, it's an ethno-religion, but it's you can get into the whole complicated definition of Judaism. But it's just an interesting dynamic. And in Israel, it's different because the entire country is culturally Jewish. And so that's the mainstream. And so it's different here. How has that been kind of coming back now that you're in college? How has it been now, especially because you're an Israeli woman, and I think that gives you a particularly difficult lens on it.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said, because now that I'm thinking about it, when I was living in Israel, I never like had this conscious thought of, yeah, like I'm Jewish and it's a religion. Like the religious part of it. Like, yeah, it's not a conscious thought in the same way that here I wake up and I was like, yeah, I'm like Jewish and everyone sees me as like just a religion. But in Israel, like that's not like something you think about, which is very like now that I'm thinking about it, it is very interesting.
You go to your 3 different Jewish internships in 3 different Jewish organizations, and that's just not really a conscious thing there.
It's yeah. I mean, not just that, because you have, for example, in Tel Aviv, you have so many restaurants that aren't even kosher. Like,
yeah,
it's not. And not only that, you have so many, like, rifts between, like, the secular Jewish community and, like, the religious Jewish community, which isn't even talked about. That's, like, a whole other thing we can get into, but you don't, like, actively think, yeah, I'm Jewish. I'm like, yeah, like, I'm, like, a person, and my grandparents survived this genocide, and my other grandparents survived that genocide, and now we're here.
So now that you are navigating going to college in America as an Israeli Jewish woman, how has that experience been like for you, especially now as a lot of the public view of Israeli people is shifting in a really disturbing way? Can you tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, it's been it's been interesting. I would say that I mean I grew up in like the most Jewish bubble ever, in the sense that I went to Jewish day school, I had my synagogue, I had my cute Israeli community back home where we only spoke Hebrew, and you know, our Thanksgiving was basically like falafel and hummus, trina, the whole 9
So is mine, actually.
So like that's just how I grew up. I didn't I understood that anti-Semitism was out there, and I understood that people didn't like Israel, but I've never seen it.
Yeah.
And so going into college, I didn't realize how prevalent it was. So I would always say, yeah, I'm Israeli, like da 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 da, and I would always get weird stares. And then, because it was just, yeah, like that's who I am, like that's a huge part of my identity, and like even just my name, like Michal Cohen, like it's in your face.
Wait, it's not Michael? This is shocking.
It's actually funny because Michal Cohen actually went to American University. So I'm
sure there are so many Michal Cohens also.
Actually, the new like rabbi of my sibling school, my old school, is Michal Cohen. So I was joking with my mom.
So
I was
funny.
like, Ima, this is actually like, you know, dual identity. Like this is what I do when I leave the house every night.
Everyone thinks that your name is Michael when they first meet you.
Oh, 110%. It's a running joke at this point.
Yeah.
But it was definitely like a very rude awakening, in the sense that all of a sudden I have to fight to get Shabbat off, or like, you know, I can't do this assignment on Shabbat. They're like, and my professor would be like, but just do it after. And I was like, do you know how late it gets out on Saturdays? Like, do you want to do like your homework at like 9-10 p.m.? No. Or, you know, on the holidays, which falls, like this year, it falls like on a Monday and a Tuesday, which is like smack dab in the middle of a school year, of the school week. And just like things like that, where I would constantly get pushback for it. And then that's like me being a religious Jew, probably the only religious Jew at my university. And then being an Israeli, it's very much constantly getting pushback for my identity, or, you know, being called the 1,000,001, you know, names that Israelis face on a day-to-day basis. And I just, every day is, I wake up and I have to, in a sense, protect like my identity, like my family, because my family, like my parents, they're like one of the most, like they're the strongest Zionists I know, as well as my grandparents and my great-grandparents who, you know, fought their way into the country, into Israel. Kind of where I come in all this is to show we're all, like, Israelis are normal people. Like, we wake up, we complain about spoiled milk, we go to school, we deal with traffic. There's way too many people on the buses, although I don't think now that there is. as many people.
Right now, probably not.
No. But I think this conversation around, Israelis is very much, we're all bloodthirsty monsters who, like, kill X amount of children every day. And I kind of see my role in this whole conversation around Israelis as, no, we're normal.
Yeah.
We're humans. And, we live our lives, and contrary to popular belief, we don't think about the conflict every waking second. I mean, when I was living in Israel, like, the conflict wasn't on my mind all the time. Like, I would go to school.
The Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah. That wasn't like an active, just like, thought that I had, like, every waking second. I mean, even like in 2014, I was still living there, and I basically lived like an outbreak of a war, and I've had like a bus that was blown up right next to my school, like so close that like the walls shook. And at first we thought it was a rocket, but it was actually just a bomb that blew up on a bus.
I mean, the fact that your first thought was like, oh yeah, this is a rocket. That's such a, I mean, I think that a lot of people in America so misunderstand the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, just like what you were saying, the idea that your first thought was that it was a rocket. What do you think we are getting wrong? What do you think Americans or anyone outside of Israel misunderstands about this conflict?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot.
Yeah.
I think here, and I definitely felt this in May with the recent flare-up between Israel and Hamas.
Yeah.
In the diaspora, especially in the U.S., it becomes all-consuming. Mm-hmm. But in Israel, it's you live your life. Your life, when there's a rocket, is not put on hold. I mean, we would still go to the grocery store. I would still go to school. I would still, go out to restaurants. And in the sense that your life isn't put on hold because of it. And I think that's not just in terms of Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but I think that's just a lesson for life in the sense you can't let this thing put your life on hold. You can't let, in the terms of the U.S., you can't let anti-Semitism put your life on hold. I think one of the biggest way to combat anti-Semitism is to not let it become an all-consuming thing. And that's something that I've learned very recently that I'm starting to come to grips with. But something else that I think that's not understood is how, not just with American Jewry, but I think just in general, is how close it is.
Mm-hmm. It's just a part of your life that you've gotten used to.
Yeah, I mean, it's strange to think that, but
yeah,
I think part of it is because almost all Israelis went into the army. They understand the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. They understand what war means. They understand that whether we like it or not, it's necessary, right? To if you have Hamas who wants to get rid of the Jewish state, if they're attacking Israel, we're not going to sit by, right? So that Israelis understand that this is necessary, but they also understand what's happening because they've all been to the army. And I think that's something that needs to be talked a lot more.
Mm-hmm. So you'd mentioned before about not letting the conflict stop you, or not letting in the diaspora anti-Semitism stop you in your life. And you are really involved with Jewish activism. So even anti-Semitism is a super different experience in the U.S. Than it is in Israel. This is a space that you and I have explored together a lot because we both work at Jewish on Campus. For those of you who are unaware of Jewish on Campus, come on, guys. Are you living under a rock? It started off as a social media campaign and now is a nonprofit organization started and run entirely by college students. Subtle Flex started and run by me. I'm co-founder and CEO. Michal is the CMO, and you've been involved with it since basically day 2. Can you tell us a little bit about Jewish on Campus and what your role is on this team?
Sure. So I think you've explained what Jewish on Campus is in a very 2-second synopsis.
Thank you very much.
My role in it, my roles since I started until now have changed a lot in the sense that I think I've had many different hats. But what I do now is that I oversee our social media group, whether Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, as well as our graphic design team and our journalism team, which we just started it up.
What is the journalism team?
They research what's going on campuses. So, for example, we just put out this piece on the rampant anti-Semitism at Rutgers University that has been going on for years, but no one has talked about it. And our journalism team and our social media team, we wrote an article about it. Our journalism team wrote an article.
What was the article about?
It was about...
What was the particular instance that happened?
So, two clubs on Rutgers University's campus called to defund Hillel, one of the largest Jewish organizations in the country, and an organization which, provides meals, Shabbat services, holidays, just counsel and community for Jewish students, because it's Zionist and pro-Israel, and allegedly. and so our journalism team wrote an article about it and how harmful it is and how Rutgers actually let this happen because they've had years of anti-Semitic incidents where just this year the A. Pie House won I want to say one of the largest Jewish fraternities in the U.S.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It was egged on Yom HaShoah, on Holocaust Memorial Day.
Wow.
And they were also investigated by the Department of Education for their anti-Semitism, and this goes back years to the Obama administration. And so our journalism team wrote an article about it, and our social media team wrote a graphic post very quickly explaining what's going on, and the conversation shifted. And everyone's talking about it now, and so
everyone is talking about it.
Yeah. So I just coordinate all that fun stuff.
What value do you see in using social media as this tool for starting a conversation about anti-Semitism?
Yeah, I think we are living in a very interesting time. I don't want to say unprecedented because I can't hear that word for another 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
So interesting time. In the sense that everything is online. Our whole world is online, essentially. And I think people are turning to social media, especially we saw it in 2020 when Jewish on Campus started. Mm-hmm. Because it's very easy to, share information and resources, B, connect with people from all across the world. And so I know that using social media, especially with rampant anti-Semitism that's on there, is so powerful in the sense that we can combat it on there and we need to take the fight to where anti-Semitism is. We can't just the fight's happening on the anti-Semitism is on social media and we're on Twitch. That doesn't make sense. You have to go where it is. I mean, I'm sure that there's anti-Semitism on Twitch. I don't know how to use it.
I've never used it.
Me either, but I do know. Yeah. And there's a lot of anti-Semitism on Instagram and Twitter in particular. And taking it somewhere else just doesn't make sense. So going to where it is and coming in with facts, with resources, with community, I think is one of the biggest ways to combat anti-Semitism, B, combat the rise of misinformation around what Judaism is, what Zionism is, what Israel is, the history of the Jewish people, and I've definitely seen. I know that's why Jewish on Campus has been successful, and I think social media in that way has changed in the way that. In the world of Jewish activism and just Jewish education.
Totally. And one thing that's been so interesting about running this team, and now that we're talking, I'm thinking about it, is that we have a team run mostly by women. Like we made a joke when we were first starting that we might be the only team in the world that has to hire more men for there to be gender equality. What has that experience been like running this team of mostly young women from 18 to 23 who are involved in this really particular space?
Yeah, it's been honestly amazing. And I don't think it's just, we're mostly, women from 18 to 23. It's also that every single woman on the team comes from a very different background. Mm-hmm. So whether you're Sephardi, Mizrahi, Ashkenazi, a mix of both, all three, or none. I'm a pure bred Ashkenazi. Although I am quickly learning that we might think that there's some spice in there, but we wouldn't know.
A little paprika.
Exactly. But we wouldn't know because, anti-Semites. But
genocide.
Gets it every time.
Our family histories are just so scattered because every other generation there's like an ethnic cleansing somewhere, and it's like, come on, can't we stay in one place for like a couple of years? Like, come on.
It's funny because my fun fact in just everything is that my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my mom, and I were all born in different countries.
What countries?
So my great-grandmother was somewhere in like Europe. I don't even know. My family doesn't really talk about life before Israel.
Yeah, and I understand that. Mine doesn't really either.
My grandmother in Brazil, my mom in Israel, and then me in the U.S.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So sorry, I totally sidetracked us. Going back to the question, what has it been? So there are women from all of these different identities, and they're all together. And men, of course, not to erase the men on our team, but there are just far more women than men.
Yes. I think it's needed because if you look, first of all, I think just in the nonprofit space, men are the ones dominating the field, and you don't see a lot of women in power. Not just in nonprofit, but in the world. And so having this place where you have powerful women, and a group of diverse, powerful women leading this fight, not only it shows other Jewish women, young Jewish women, that you have a lot of power. Like, we hear you. Yeah. We are, like, sounds weird, but we're one of you. And don't let, men, like this whole idea of glass ceiling. And I think JOC has really, pushed that, has broken it in terms of the nonprofit space. And really thinking about it, I think throughout Jewish history, it's been the woman constantly that has been behind, Jewish victory and Jewish survival. And so, in a sense, it makes sense that it's dominated. It's a weird word, but that it's run by Jewish women. Because Jewish women, time and time again, have aided in Jewish survival, have, in war, you have, Yudit and Yael and Miriam, who have, like, saved the Jewish people and, won wars against people who wanted to destroy, Jews. And so through, like, this conversation, like, my brain working and thinking, it just makes sense because women have constantly been in that role of saving Jews. And, it's weird. It's a little bit strange now just to say, oh, we're saving Jews.
No, I know what you mean, though.
But I think
Jewish on campus is saving.
Let's just switch the slogan.
Right? Someone change our website right now. We have to put that up.
Jews on campus, saving Jews. No, but in the sense that we're protecting or speaking up for Jews on campus. The fact that it's dominated by Jewish women, just, it makes sense with the trend of Jewish history, which is very long. Absolutely. And so there's a lot of precedent.
Yeah. We've been around for a while. And it's funny, on previous episodes we've spoken about the need to have women in C-suite positions and executive positions. Our C-suite is 3 women and 1 man. The 1 man is lovely, but it's mostly run by women, and that has created this really positive and inclusive culture on our team that I'm really proud of. On the flip side, Jewish women in this activist space get a ton of pushback, not just anti-Semitism, but also misogyny. What has your experience been like at this intersection?
Awful.
Oh no.
The intersection of anti-Semitism and misogyny is brutal beyond brutal. Mm-hmm. Jewish on Campus actually made a post about it. Because we are mostly run by women, we felt that it's, it's like, of course, because so many of us on the team face it, it's like, of course we need to make this post. Of course, so go check it out if you haven't already.
Shameless plug, Jewish on Campus on Instagram.
And so, in my experience, and I think a lot of other Jewish women who are loud on the internet, and I think me being a very loud Israeli Jewish woman, it's been not just people saying, oh, you're a Zionist baby killer, but also go fix your roots, or you're fat, or you're ugly, or, any other comments on someone told me I should go to see a dermatologist and I should go on Accutane. I was like, sir, I know, God. Don't rub it in my face.
That's horrible. Oh
yeah, and so
I've gotten some comments like that. I've gotten some disgusting comments like that as well.
Yeah, I got this one this morning. Anyways.
Oh, no. My face is breaking out right now, too. It's the stress.
It is the stress.
The stress of I used to joke around that, if they can do one thing, if, the anti-Semitic community can do one thing, can they either just pay for, a dermatologist, a therapist, or a masseuse? Because I need all 3.
Or just all of the above. You know what? There's been a lot of damage. I think the least they can do is all of the above.
Oh, my God.
But it's definitely prevalent, and I think it's something that not a lot of people are talking about, in the sense that people who consider themselves to be social justice warriors or people fighting the good fight, however you want to phrase it, I see them the ones, at least in my comment sections and in my DMs, they're the ones that are usually commenting on the way that I look. As well as mixed with the other, anti-Semitic tropes.
Yeah.
And I think it's because, one, both misogyny and anti-Semitism are so ingrained in our culture that it just makes sense that there's an intersection between the two. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because, in a way, it has become acceptable. Because, especially when it comes to Jews, anti-Semitism, the way that it's manifested, has always... There's been a facet of it that's talked about, the way that the Jew looks, right? How to spot a Jew, in a way. Yeah. And so it makes a lot of sense that, especially for Jewish women who are already especially for a woman who are facing misogyny, period, around the world, and for Jews who are facing anti-Semitism, and for an Israeli who people don't want to even acknowledge that the country exists, that there's an intersection between all of them, because it's so ingrained in our culture, and because it's just been the trend of, I guess, the world.
Yeah.
But I also think, A, it's becoming so much more prevalent, and B, the Jewish community at large, especially Jewish men, need to do a much better job at standing up for Jewish women. Not to defend us, because we don't need anyone to defend us. We're strong as heck.
Oh yeah, we are.
But I think to call them out, because they're not going to listen to us. They already are ridiculing the way that we look. But we need Jewish men to push back on it, and B to acknowledge that it exists, and for them to think, what can I do to stop this? Right? Because Jewish women are already in such a vulnerable position. And I mean, I've heard countless stories of, and I'm sure you have too, of a Jewish man and a Jewish woman who have said the same exact thing. And the Jewish woman has faced a lot more pushback. And so Jewish men need to be in this position to amplify Jewish women. Not in a way that, poor us, but to fight back against this intersection of anti-Semitism and misogyny.
In an empowering way, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And that really brings us to the last question and the point of this podcast. Because, Michal, you're a role model for so many other Jewish women in the community who look to you as someone that they want to be like. For a good reason, because you're awesome.
Thank you.
And what we want this podcast to be is a chance for everyone, but especially young Jewish women, to have access to mentors when they're navigating the world in this space. What is one piece of advice you'd want them to take away from this conversation?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm going to...
Thank you.
I'm going to frame this into... So I have a little sister. Her name is Miriam. And she's going into high school, which is, rough. And so I'm going to frame this as if I'm giving her a piece of advice.
That is perfect.
She didn't necessarily grow up in Israel, but, we both have an Israeli home. So I'm going to, leave a little bit the Israeli piece out. But as a Jewish woman, what I would want to tell her, or just as a woman in general, I think, is that you will face a lot of pushback in anything that you do. Doesn't matter whether it's with Judaism, with the way you eat, the way you sleep, the way you walk. And that's going to follow you from high school until for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. But something that I wish I knew when I was her age is that there's a huge community of Jewish women who are at your disposal for guidance and for mentorship. Mm-hmm. And don't ever think that you have to do it alone, and that you have to keep it into yourself, and that you have to internalize it, and you have to be this perfect Jewish woman, young Jewish woman, because that has gotten us nowhere. Break the rules when necessary. Don't do anything stupid. Like I have. I've done many stupid things.
Yeah, we all have.
So don't, for her, and for I think for a lot of young Jewish women, don't be afraid to break the rules. Because following the rules as women has never gotten us anywhere. Mm-hmm. And as Jewish women, I think the odds are stacked against us. Mm-hmm. And so for you, from Miriam, my sister, for you to take me as a resource, or if you don't want to talk to me, because whatever, that's fine. For you,
I got her. I can help.
If you want to go to Julia and ask for guidance and ask for mentorship and ask for tips, go for it. And do it, because there is strength in numbers, and that is how you have an organization like Jewish on Campus, which is run by women, is because we have broken the rules, because we have broken the status quo. And so never ever be afraid to do that, to take that risk, to step on toes, and to seek that community of Jewish women, because that is how the Jewish woman will continue to be in these positions of influence.
Importance, yeah.
Yes, and how the Jewish people as a whole will survive.
Absolutely. That's fantastic advice. And Michal, as always, it's so much fun to talk to you. And you're someone who I've grown so much by knowing. And I'm just so thankful that you came and you chatted with us today.
Thank you so much for having me and for doing the work that you do and for really being a role model for Jewish women everywhere, young and old.
The same for you, girl. We're in this together.
Heck yeah.
Thank you so much. Can you guys tell Michal is the CMO of a nonprofit organization? Because she's really smart. I loved this conversation so much because Michal's experience growing up was just similar enough to mine for us to relate to one another, but also just different enough from mine for me to learn something new from her every time we speak. One thing we both really relate to, unfortunately, is online harassment. We've gotten death threats, assault threats, and more. As Michal's coworker and her friend, I've watched as she's been bullied and shamed because of where she's from, because of where she grew up, because of where her family raised her, and because she's proud of it. Michal easily could have just chosen to shut down. She could have stopped being a Jewish activist and instead had a very normal college experience. But that's just not Michal. She does not back down from a challenge. She rises above it. Instead of letting the hate she's faced stand in the way of her work, she's let it fuel her work. She's used it as motivation to fight for a future where Jewish women won't be abused for being Jewish women. Where an Israeli-American student can go into a college classroom without worrying that their professors will lower their grades because of where they're from. Where the world will see her family, her people, as human, not as political objects. I am so inspired to work with Michal, and I'm so inspired to call her a friend. And more than anything, I am so inspired to have had the honor of introducing her to you all today. Michal is so much more than a nice Jewish girl. She is a fierce leader of the Jewish future, and I am so proud to know her. And this, my friends, is where we'll leave you for today's episode of Nice Jewish Girls. Hopefully a bit smarter and a bit more inspired. I would love, love, love to hear your feedback and suggestions for other nice Jewish girls to host on this pod. Email us at podcast@jewishnpacked.com, and don't forget to join us next week when we'll be speaking with Sabrina Miller, a political journalist and Jewish advocate on college antisemitism in the UK. Nice Jewish Girls is a production of Unpacked, a division of Open Door Media. Rivki Stern is our producer, and I am your host, Julia Jassy. And one more time, if you haven't subscribed yet, guys, what are you waiting for? Let's do it. Don't forget to rate and review us too. It's the best way for other people to find the show. And of course, we all want that to happen. And don't forget to follow Unpacked at all of the social media places like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Just look for @JewishUnpacked. Talk to you later, ladies.